So the fascistic regime in Pakistan is engaged, has been engaged in the last few hours in harassing and tear gassing members of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf who have been up the fascistic regime using the police to arrest Imran Khan. While the daughter of Nawaz Sharif, Mariam Nawaz, is it Mariam Nawaz? One of the two Mariams, it probably is a minister in the Sharif government, is boasting that Imran Khan is hiding and is scared. Well, that is not substantiated or substantiable, but the essential fact is that the running battle is ongoing and it will continue to escalate. Now, contrast that with the situation in the United Kingdom, where the fascistic regime, fronted by the Indian descended Rishi Sunak, is capitulating to the harder fascistic wings of the Conservative Party. After the latest phase of the dispute between the BBC and Gary Lineker was reportedly concluded by Gary Lineker agreeing to return to present the match of the day next weekend. Apart from that, there have been demonstrations outside the UK House of Parliament overnight against the fascistic bill aimed at denying the universal human rights of the asylum seekers and refugees. The introduction of the bill last Tuesday in a speech by Suella Eviller Crueller Fernandez, who also disguises herself as a Braverman, was actually the trigger that influenced Gary Lineker in posting that tweet about the dehumanizing language used against the people fleeing persecution and war and poverty and hunger that were reminiscent of the language used by the Nazis in Germany in the 1930s. In preparation, Gary Lineker didn't post that, but I'm saying that that language was used by the Nazis in the 1930s in Germany in preparing the ordinary people in Germany to become ready to perpetrate massacres against their own neighbors. Mainly Jewish people, trade unionists, and left-wingers, and other minority people whose numbers were smaller, but who were seen as equally vulnerable to the fascist attacks, and the fascists attacked them in what became known as the Holocaust. Now here is 10 minutes ago, there is a post on the internet, United News of Bangladesh, which says Pakistan police ex-PM Khan supporters scuffle near his home. It's a picture of these. Pakistani police on Tuesday scuffled with supporters of former Prime Minister Imran Khan outside his home in eastern city of Lahore as officers arrived to serve a warrant for the 71-year-old opposition leader to appear in court later this week on graft charges. Police fired tear gas at the house as Khan supporters hurled rocks and bricks at the officers. About a dozen police and some 35 of Khan's supporters were reported injured. Tear gas shells and pieces of bricks littered the pavement as Khan's followers fought back with batons snatched from the police. They keep using that word officers. Fuck them. Khan has been ordered to appear before a judge in Islamabad. Now, this is a news outlet in Bangladesh which is completely fucking corrupt. They are not reporting this in the context of democracy, in the context of Khan and the Tariq-e-Insaf opposing fascism. And the reason is that the regime fronted by Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh is the regime that actually controls the Bangladesh media. And the Bangladesh media is too supine and corrupt, voluntarily corrupt and supine. Let's check what other outlets are saying about Imran Khan. Now, this is the one that is being carried by the AOL website. It says violent clashes in Pakistan as police tried to arrest former leader Imran Khan. That is timed at 14th of March, 3:45 GMT. Let's say it's from the Independent. It's carried by the AOL, but it's actually an item on the Independent online. So protests police charged tear gas shells. After a police team arrived from Islamabad to arrest him on a court order, government spokesman Mir told Reuters news agency. Khan called on his supporters to stand up for the supremacy of law and fight for true independence. That is Hakiki Azadi. Supporters of Imran Khan and riot police scuffle outside Khan's house in Lahore on Tuesday. AFP via Getty Images. Police have come to arrest and send me to jail, he said in a video posted on his Twitter feed. If something happens to me or sent to jail or they kill me, you have to prove that this nation will continue to struggle even without Imran Khan. Similar clashes took place last week. The police said workers from Khan's PTI party attacked officers with stones and bricks. Television pictures showed Khan supporters also using slingshots. Khan has been embroiled in several court cases since the ousting early last in a court of that is a complete fucking lie. A court in Islamabad had issued an arrest warrant in a case against him for unlawfully selling state gifts while in power from 2018 to 2022. Khan has been demanding snap polls in protest rallies across the country, a move his successor Shahbaz Sharif has rejected, saying the elections would be held as scheduled later this year. And this is mainly a Reuters news agency item run by the Independent on their website, and carried by the AOL in this version that we have just read. Essentially, the line is similar, but the bias is slightly different. The Times of India says ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan posts video message for supporters as police arrived to arrest him. Former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan posted a video message for his supporters as police arrived in Lahore to arrest him. Imran Khan urged supporters So, what is happening in Pakistan is that the regime is openly behaving as a I mean, if Imran Khan is served with a notice to appear in court, what could be the reason he might not appear in court? One of two reasons. One is that the court is rigged and the police are lying. Scheduled for next Saturday. The aftermath is being dominated by the navel gazing, mainly by the so-called left. Let's say personified on this occasion or this day at this time by Owen Jones in The Guardian, who is described as a Guardian columnist. Now, Owen Jones, whether he's a Guardian columnist or not, is one of the most facetious, superficial, completely opportunistic operator of a career as a left-winger. When he came to Tower Hamlets on, was it the 7th of September 2013, 10 years ago, he was brought there at the invitation of the corrupt incumbent in the corrupt post of mayor, Lutfur. And Owen Jones stood there supposedly talking about the campaigns and battles against racism in the past in Tower Hamlets. Now, Owen Jones had no idea what he was talking about. Owen Jones was reading a script on his mobile, and it looked completely artificial, incredible, unbelievable. As it looked unbelievable, incredible, and superficial, he did that. The script was as unbelievable and superficial and absolutely untruthful. Now, Lutfur Rahman, the corrupt incumbent in the corrupt post of the elected mayor, spewed idiocies. And he had as co-speakers the likes of Ohid Ahmed. There was nobody present around him, Lutfur Rahman that is, that belonged to the campaign, the actual campaign against racism in Tower Hamlets in the previous decades. So Lutfur Rahman was lying, and in order to give credibility, appearance of credibility to the lies, he had brought in Owen Jones. Now, Owen Jones was a hired left-wing spewer. There were not many people from the local Tower Hamlets community. There were about, how shall I say, about 100 or so people there. Most of them, not everyone, but most of them were white and left-wing and totally artificial. Now, what Owen Jones is saying today in the Guardian piece on the online, I shall check that one in a minute, is as false as his spiel in the Altavali Park on the Saturday, the 7th of September 2013. Let's check the date in case I may have got the date wrong or day wrong, let's say. So it was a Saturday, 7th of September 2013. There was absolutely nothing in any of the spiels that refer to any of the actual campaigns or actions against racism in Tower Hamlets. And there shouldn't have been, because the speakers were totally absent from any of those campaigns, or they are too young and too inexperienced and too opportunistic to even know what was going on in those campaigns. Now let's check the events in Tower Hamlets in 2013. So that was the item that was generally headed "Stop the EDL," 7th of September 2013. And the take on the Guardian website, it says 9 years old, more than 9 years old. EDL marchers scuffle with anti-racist protesters near East London Mosque. 600 supporters of far-right group kept away from mosque by police after losing court challenge to restrictions on march. Police hold back English Defence League members near Tower Bridge as the EDL marchers tried to reach the East London Mosque. Well, they never did. This is a piece by Conal Urquhart and Mark Townsend and posted at 1574, 24 hours BST, which is almost exactly to the hour. Today, scuffles broke out as demonstrators tried to break through police lines to confront a march of the English Defence League in the city of London. Over 600 supporters of the EDL tried to march to the East London Mosque on Whitechapel Road on Saturday, but were stopped by police near Aldgate East Station, around 600 meters from the mosque. East of the police lines, a far larger counter demonstration waved "Unite against fascism" and "Hope Not Hate" banners. Well, that is an absolute lie. There was no far larger counter demonstration at all. And that is a lie by the Guardian, which has been lying to boost the image of Lutfur Rahman. Tower Hamlets Mayor Lutfur Rahman and John Biggs, a local Labour London Assembly member, were among the campaigners who listened to speeches at Altavali Park, named after an Asian garment worker who was murdered in a racist attack in May 1978. Rahman said he was very fed up with having to deal with these demonstrations, saying, "We just want to get on with our normal lives. We are celebrating peace and tranquility. We are not espousing violence. The people who want to talk about violence and inflict violence and hate on others can just go back to their nests and their holes." And this is a quote from a manufactured speech by Lutfur Rahman, according to the Guardian's invention. "We are a united community and we are a diverse community. Young people are not coming out today because they are frightened." That is very serious admission of stupidity and cowardice, isn't it? Young people would come out if they knew that there was racist attacks coming. Big said it was atrocious that the march had not been banned and urged people to stand up against racism. Big said Tower Hamlets is a vibrant and diverse borough, which I'm proud to call home. Fucking racist cunt. He says call home. He doesn't say which is my home. He patronizes the whole of the population in Tower Hamlets, the fucking lying racist cunt. Like many other areas of our country, there are problems such as unemployment and poverty. But the EDL blame others for our country's problems in an attempt to divide us. Fuck off. The EDL was a parasite from the word go. It wasn't the EDL that created any of these myths. It is the likes of the lying John Biggs and others in the racist Labour Party that allowed the narrative of blaming the so called others for the backwardness, the poverty, shortage that affected ordinary people, white people. Now, the Guardian piece says the EDL leaders, what fucking leaders, had wanted to rally in an area in Tar Hamlets, which they say is subject to Sharia law. But Mr. Justice King ruled on Friday that a police decision to impose restrictions over fears of serious public disorder was reasonable and proportionate. Now, there is nothing in that piece more than 9 years ago in The Guardian or any similar pieces that actually talked about racism. They talked about individual racism or institutional racism or organizational racism or the racism engendered and tolerated and allowed by the Labour Party under successive leadership regimes in the Labour Party. And as I have said, James Callaghan was one of the most racist leaders of the Labour Party ever. Now, the stand taken by the people in 1921, known as the Popular Councillors, in defending the ordinary people of East London in 1921 against the conservative, poverty inflicting rates law, set an example that has not been followed by a single batch, single intake of councillors in Tar Hamlets Council. What is now is which is more than 100 years ago. In the 100 years that have passed since 1921 and the popular councillors going to jail in defending their constituents, Tar Hamlets Council has been elected and has been in place because the Popular Borough Council was, of course, one of the three boroughs that became merged in 1965 to form what is now known or what has since been known as the Tar Hamlets Council. Whether before the merger or since the merger, the three boroughs that have become Tar Hamlets since 1965, April 1965, have not seen any regime, any leadership, any batch of councillors, elected councillors, do anything remotely similar to the people who were councillors in Poplar in 1921. And this quotation by The Guardian of Lutfur Rahman, let's go back to this piece. What a stupid speech. Rahman said he was very fed up with having to deal with these demonstrations, saying we just want to get on with our normal lives. Now, this fucking stupidity of this idiotic script, whoever scripted it, it most certainly wasn't something that Lutfur Rahman had actually written, is that it is in denial of the reality of racism, the reality of corruption in British politics, the reality of the conservatives egging on the likes of the EDL, and the reality of the judicial system that has not ever imposed the appropriate kind of punishment to the racists at any stage, on any dates. And the so-called garment workers, the murder of Altabali, has not been followed by any punishment of the murderers that remotely resembles a fair punishment for the murder of an innocent man because of his race, his ethnicity, and nearly 10 years before that, the murder in Stepney in Tar Hamlets by a racist of Tosir Ali showed the same thing. Racists get away with murders, literally. And the evidence shows that none of the racist murders or racist attacks has been followed up by the so-called prosecution authorities or the judiciary or the political party or the parliament. Why? If you look at the behavior of Theresa May, Priti Patel, Suella Crueller Fernandez, then you can see that all three of them, including David Blunkett, who was Tony Blair's Home Secretary, all of them have been using the same fascistic language of intolerance towards so-called migrants as Margaret Thatcher did in January in the World in Action program interview that was broadcast on the 30th of January 1978. Now remember 1978, that was January 1978 and February, March, April. On the fifth calendar month, Altavali was murdered in 1978. Fifth calendar months after Margaret Thatcher delivered a racist incitement that migrants were swamping the country. And years later, when David Blunkett became Home Secretary, he was using the same word swamp. And none of the so-called explainers published by The Guardian about anything has really taken full, even half account of the reality of why migrants have been needing to seek asylum or refuge in the United Kingdom. No reference to imperialism, no reference to the actual robbery of trillions and trillions and trillions worth of resources from Asia and Africa, and in this context, from the subcontinent of Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So when the 7th of September 2013 rallies took place in Altavali Park, attended by, I don't think, even 100 people, let alone more than 600 people, as the Guardian lyingly said. When the spiel was delivered by Owen Jones from his mobile, he was reading from his mobile, he didn't make any mention of imperialism, colonialism, East India Company, Mir Zafar, and nor did Lutfur Rahman. Lutfur Rahman, saying that he was fed up, showed that he was completely empty. His brain had no information. Nor did Wahid Ahmad. There was no contextual reference to any of the sequences of events that caused what is nowadays known as the migration. The migration didn't happen before the empire. And migration didn't actually happen during the empire. And that is, of course, when they talked about these schools being overwhelmed or schools places being needed by the migrants and the asylum seekers, they never talked about Thomas Babington Macaulay. Now, Macaulay in the 1920s was confecting the most serious pack of lies about education and about schools and about learning, about languages, about history, about religion, about the history of the idea of education. And Macaulay delivered the lie that entire subcontinent lacked any intellectual substance, that the libraries in the West, any good library in the West, contained more substance than all of the Arabic, Sanskrit, and Persian language books and materials combined in the subcontinent. And so on. So, racism and the incitement to hatred that Suella Braverman has been engaged in is not a new thing. And all the debate about the so-called kind of competition or the rivalry or the challenge that Gary Lineker represented against the BBC establishment has been artificial. All the coverage, not what the Gary Lineker tweet actually said. Gary Lineker correctly identified in a summary that the 1930s Germany was dehumanizing people, and that was, he didn't say that, but he didn't go on to say that, but that was actually in effect followed in the latter decade 1940s by the actual perpetration of the Holocaust. Now, none of this has been examined even by the Guardian or by the Times, of course, or by the Financial Times or by the Daily Telegraph, or the most certainly not by the Daily Mail, because the Daily Mail continuing, it was appeasing the Hitler party Nazis in the 1930s in Germany, and it was encouraging British fascists to imitate Hitler. And the BBC, most crucially in this context, the BBC's Director General at the time, John Reith, a Scottish man, was the Director General of the BBC, was engaged in endless maneuvers to prevent Winston Churchill, the politician, from using the BBC's mainly radio platforms. Because he, John Reith, was a fanatic admirer of Adolf Hitler, the Nazi Party, and of Benito Mussolini in Italy. So these are the realities. The BBC had a Director General who was a fascist. So the fact that the Director General, Tim David, who effectively sacked Gary Lineker from Match of the Day, is not overtly known as a fascist himself, makes no difference. What he did was exactly to repeat what John Reith had done. Reith had sabotaged many of Churchill's efforts to appear on the BBC, to campaign against fascism, to campaign against Hitler and the Nazis. And Gary Lineker was actually doing, in the context of warning people about fascism, what in principle Churchill was doing. So Churchill was prevented and sabotaged by the Director General, John Reith, and Gary Lineker has been prevented from continuing the personally run Twitter account campaigning against fascism, intolerance, and scaremongering against the most persecuted and desperate people seeking to flee persecution, war, hunger in parts of Africa and Asia. And the piece in The Guardian today, that is Tuesday, the 14th of March, 2023. Let's check the Owen Jones' piece again, and I'll show how similar the Owen Jones piece is. This is a heading that is completely sick making. This is a heading to a piece by the sick makingly, cringe makingly, so selfish and artificial Owen Jones. This is timed at 11:30 GMT today, Tuesday, 14th of March 2023, and it says the heading. The heading reminds of Margaret Thatcher using the word rejoice. Rejoice at Lineker's victory over the BBC, and then the right. Then learn the lessons for battles to come. Now, because as the contents of the piece itself, the BBC is not the Director General or the Chairman. The BBC, journalistically, is the thousands of people who work there in the news gathering, in the research, in the broadcasting, in the appearance, etc., etc. So the BBC should not be simplified as Owen Jones has done, or this heading, The Guardian editorially has done. It should be analyzed in full, which is a large organization which has been wrongly beholden to the wrong people via the wrong personnel who have been in post as Director General with one or two exceptions. For example, the current Director General is, of course, Tim Davie. And Owen Jones, let me just get this one absolutely right. Now, the Owen Jones first paragraph is completely wrong. It says the BBC's humiliating climb down over its attempted silencing of Gary Lineker is a milestone. It's absolutely no such thing. For a start, it didn't climb down. This particular deal is a tactical kind of stage. Tactical stage in the unending battle to hold the BBC to account for the organization's role in reporting truthfully what has been happening in society. The truthful performance by the BBC of its duties to tell the truth has been sabotaged, prevented, and delayed by the likes of right wingers that have been installed in strategic positions inside the BBC. The majority, it's not possible to say the numbers, but essentially the majority of the people who work in the news production, the news delivery of the BBC, are still just about nearer the objective truth. But that appearance is being stifled by the fascistic administration that is in control and has been in control of the BBC, including the likes of Laura Kunzberg and others, as Owen Jones has highlighted, like Andrew Neil, who held a long time center seat in presenting politics program in the BBC. Now, what happened during the time of Andrew Neil's reign? Owen Jones didn't actually diagnose Andrew Neil's this Andrew Neil, the period that Andrew Neil held sway in the BBC was allowed to be passed without the Guardian or Owen Jones or anybody else holding the BBC to account for allowing a fascist and a racist like Andrew Neil to do what he did. Now, all this summary in the piece by Owen Jones about Tim Davie and Guto Hari and all that is completely off the main point, which is that the Guardian and Owen Jones himself, who are supposed to be not part of the BBC's maneuver and BBC establishment maneuver, have failed to scrutinize what was going on at that time, and they're now, even now, failing to scrutinize what is going on in this particular quote debacle or debacle. Now, Owen Jones asked the preposterous question, how then has this preposterous myth proven so enduring? And then he answers, which is completely wrong, perhaps right-wing newspapers genuinely believe it because they are so accustomed to dominating the media ecosystem that they regard any deviation from the conservative ideology to be unacceptable bias. But much more likely, they are simply aware that they have seized on an effective tactic. They can place the BBC under perpetual pressure from the right, both by witch hunting anything that could potentially contradict the right-wing political consensus, and by pretending they are being victimized and marginalized within the BBC. Now, what the BBC is not doing and what it should be doing, and what neither Owen Jones nor The Guardian is pointing out, and they should be pointing out, is that the BBC should be reporting the truth, objective truth, both about what is going on in the United Kingdom, macro system and micro examples, as well as in the rest of the world. And in the context of the migration and the context of the background to why people seek migration and an asylum in the United Kingdom. What is happening in countries that, including Pakistan, in fact, are being left by these would-be migrants and asylum seekers. As I said in my broadcast on Channel 4, slot, in January 1992, the way to stop the migration by any number of people, hundreds of thousands of people, aiming to reach Western European countries. The only way, the certain way, would be to sincerely address the issues of poverty, lack of democracy, lack of accountability, lack of judicial fairness, lack of judicial freedom and independence in those countries. But that is not what is happening, but that is what should have happened. I said that 31 years ago in 1992. I said that on internationally broadcast television channel program, Channel 4 news program, because the slot was part of the 1 hour of the Channel 4 news between 7 to 8 p.m. local time, sometimes 19 to 2000 hours GMT. I said that the Western countries, Western governments, and Western opinion formers, let's say, were obliged to address the poverty, the starvation, the hunger, the genocide, the violence that existed in the countries of origin. And those needed to be addressed, those needed to be ended. And that would be the real way to stop people having to feel the need to migrate either to the United Kingdom, to Germany, to France, or any other Western country. But for 31 years, the Western governments, leaders, the political parties, and the parliaments have ignored what I said. But this is what is actually the real issue. They are not addressing the issue of poverty, hunger, starvation, lack of democracy, lack of safety, social security in those countries. To take an example of the internationally recognized sportswoman aged 27, the Pakistani 27-year-old sportswoman, she stands out. She stands out as a much more accomplished representative of the woman in Pakistan than Malala Yousafzai, who was feted in the Oscars in the last 2 days. Now, such an accomplished woman, sportswoman, in a country like Pakistan, which is condemned wrongly for suppressing women, that woman decided that there was no hope for her in Pakistan to make enough income and have enough security to look after her disabled child Hassan. So Shahida Raza, the sportswoman, decided to escape through Iran, through Turkey, and then took the risk, and she drowned in the waters of Italy. How difficult is it for the Guardian to understand that kind of straightforward case? Why is it that the corrupt Owen Jones, over pretending as a left-winger, has not heard of her? Nor has the Guardian. This is a woman who was not disabled herself, was not lacking in education or accomplishment. She was somebody who has now been referred to as the heroine in Pakistan, of course, too late. But she deserved to be feted while she was alive. It's like, let's say, this girl that has now won another significant match. Emma Raducanu in the last 24 hours. Imagine if Emma Raducanu were one of the people who was trying to reach Italy or Europe and got drowned. How big would be the headings in the Western papers? And how loud would be the condemnation of the regimes that would have caused her to leave her own country in search of a better life in terms of economic safety? So these are things that I, of course, summarized in my slot presentation, the edition that I broadcast on Channel 4 news slot in January 1992. Of course, I have written and presented other slot editions, but this is the one that keeps coming back into the focus because of the exact predictions coming to true. The predictions that I made in that particular program has come true and is coming true, has been coming true every single time. There is nothing in the BBC news generally, and that is because of the agenda that is set by the executive. There is nothing in the BBC news programs, in the factual programs, that actually discuss issues that have got correlations between the crisis existing in societies and the consequences that spill out and spill over and affect the demography and the demographic compositions in countries like the United Kingdom. As I said, I have not been kind of followed up, nor has anyone made any reference in any of the mainstream broadcasts or any publications of what I had predicted correctly. But then even Gary Lineker, his humanitarian tweet has been completely misinterpreted, and he has been taken off the main focal point, which is to talk about the reason why the people feel the need to leave their country. Now, let's read again what he has been saying. He said, even in the latest one, correctly, he has said, and Owen Jones is a complete and utter cunt. So if we say what Lineker said, in his tweet, let's find out what he said. He said that the government's plan, this is one of the One of the summaries online that is written 4 days ago that the UK government's plan in the legislation to detain and deport asylum seekers arriving by boat was an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany. So what is Lineker saying in his latest tweet that is accessible? So this is what Lineker said yesterday, and this is the bit that I refer to. A final thought: however difficult the last few days have been, it simply doesn't compare to having to flee your home from persecution or war to seek refuge in a land far away. It's heartwarming to have seen the empathy towards their plight from so many of you. That is Gary Lineker saying in his tweet after the so called temporary, I would say, deal with Tim Davie and the BBC bureaucracy. Now, of course, in none of the other solidarity tweets and solidarity kind of statements, including by Rory Stewart, is there any reference to the depth of the problems that I alone summarized in my Channel 4 slot broadcast in January 1992. And I predicted the devastating nightmare political atmosphere of hostility that would be engineered and engendered across the Western European countries and societies by opportunists seeking to exploit the desperation of the people who were forced to leave their own countries, their origin, poverty, hunger, famine, starvation, political insecurity in those countries were not solved. And what I meant was that they had to be solved by the intervention of the Western governments, Western kind of partnerships like the European Union. Both the European Union and the post Brexit United Kingdom and pre Brexit United Kingdom and pre Brexit EU absolutely failed and are continuing to fail to address those issues that I alone highlighted in my short slot called the slot that is broadcast at the end of the Channel 4 news. That was in January 1992. Now, the repercussions of the issue being referred to, the issue of the German Nazis dehumanizing the vulnerable people in society, this is only about 5% of the real problem. The dehumanization cannot take place in isolation. The dehumanization of the most vulnerable people can only happen, as John Salter has said, by other factors coming into play. And the United Nations, despite the fact that the 1951 Refugee Convention was a product of the United Nations, the United Nations remains a paralyzed bureaucracy. It's not actually performing to the task, to the level, performing the duty to the level, anywhere near the level that is required to safeguard these vulnerable people, protect these people, help these people materially, emotionally, legally from attacks from various regimes in the destination countries. And in between, we shall be, of course, updating on all of these in due course. This is now 17:05 hours GMT, and the length of this broadcast with some interruptions because of the disconnection that happened with internet is been 1 hour 7 minutes long, and I should be bringing this particular edition, part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions on Tuesday, the 14th of March 2000 and